Okay, we're done talking about Indiana for today. I want to talk about the college football playoff from a more national perspective. I want to predict the 4 quarterfinal games. This episode is being recorded on Monday, so Penn State plays Boise State tomorrow, and the rest of the games are occurring 2 days from now on New Year's Day. The Verbo Fiesta Bowl consists of number 4 Penn State and number 9 Boise State. Penn State is favored by 11.5. Boise has Boise's number 2 in the country in sacks. So the two things about Boise State are Ashton Jeanty and that pass rush, right? Boise blitzes a lot. They put a lot of guys in the box, and they throw a lot of players. They throw a lot of defensive power at the quarterback. They get after it, right? And on the same time, on the other side of the ball, they get after it with Ashton Jeanty. So Ashton Jeanty is going to, of course, be a member of this team that is going to fuel the offense. Ashton Jeanty has to be clicking, and he probably will be, even though he hasn't yet played a run defense like Penn State to this point. So Ashton Jeanty on offense, he's going to have to be the workhorse, and we expect him to be. Boise State also is number 2 in the country in sacks. So if they're able to get to the quarterback, they're able to get to Drew Allar and fluster Drew Allar, Boise State might have a real good chance, because if they can grind that Penn State offense to a halt, if they can really slow down Allar, slow down that offense that put up a ton of points on Oregon just a couple of weeks ago, maybe, just maybe, Boise State frees up some room, frees up some time for Ashton Jeanty to work his way down the field, a couple explosive plays here or there. Next thing you know, Boise State's up by a score or down by just 3 in the fourth quarter, and maybe they can steal away this win from Penn State. They have to work themselves into a position where they have a chance in the fourth quarter. It's a chess game, right? Boise State is most likely not going to be able to just go out and win it and dominate right away. They're going to have to work their way to that point, and that's going to take some time, and it's going to take some methodical working down the field. It's going to take some really strong defensive stops. It's going to take some big plays with the pass rush. It's going to take forcing some third and longs. Boise State just needs to be in a situation where it's 24-21 in the fourth quarter, and they have the ball with 8 minutes left, and Ashton Jeanty can look for an opportunity to score again. That's the point that they want them to be at. That's where they have Penn State right where they want them. Conversely, Penn State has a lot of opportunities to make sure that is out of the question, right? Boise State just wants a chance at the end. Boise State just wants to be in contention, down by just a score, something along those lines in the fourth quarter. That's what Boise State is looking to achieve. Penn State, on the other hand, has a lot of opportunities to make that not the case at all. Boise is in the 100s in explosive plays allowed, and that is problematic because they send a lot of players into the into the backfield to get after the quarterback, right? They put a lot of emphasis on getting to the quarterback. They put a lot of emphasis on that pass rush. If they fail, if they can't get to Drew Allar, or if Drew Allar has enough time or is quick enough with the ball firing it out of his hand, he's aware enough to locate the receivers that are in open space that is vacated by those blitzing rushers, right? Because common sense, anytime you blitz, anytime you send multiple players into the backfield, there's going to be open space where they came from, right? If Allar can find the receivers in those spots, he can just chip away at Boise State, 7 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, and Boise State's in the 100s in explosive plays allowed. Drew Allar, the way Penn State plays offense, they don't throw the ball downfield nearly as much as they just check it down. And if you throw too much emphasis on Drew Allar and can't succeed, you can't hit home, you can't actually bring down the quarterback, he's going to pick you apart, he's going to dissect you, and at least a couple of those check down 7-yard throws is going to break away for a touchdown because Boise State's secondary struggles in that area when they don't have a lot of help and there's one-on-one matchups against a Penn State team that fundamentally has a more talented roster than Boise State does. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's why I think Penn State's going to win this game, right? This run defense is better than Boise has seen all year. Ashton Jeanty is going to have a slow start. He's going to struggle. He's going to have to work his way up. But Penn State, I think just the way they match up with Boise, this offense for Penn State is in perfect position to score and to put points on the board, and we know they can do that because they just did it against Oregon a few weeks ago. I think Boise is better than people think. I think everyone discounts Boise State more than they should, but I think Penn State is in a great spot to win and potentially cover the 11.5 just because of the way they match up when Penn State's on offense, and the fact that we kind of know that Ashton Jeanty is not going to be as productive or as efficient as he typically is on offense for the Broncos, because Penn State's just another level of run defense. It's the same as what we were talking about with Mendoza earlier. Mendoza hasn't faced a defense like Penn State or Oregon. Ashton Jeanty hasn't faced a run defense like Penn State, and I don't think Boise State can win that game any other ways straight up against the Nittany Lions, and that's why I think Penn State brings this one home and advances to the semifinals, marking the furthest Franklin or any of this Penn State program recently has ever gotten. They did not make the 14 playoff ever. Now they would be proving that they deserve to be there with a semifinal appearance after wins over SMU and Boise. The Peach Bowl. Texas is favored by 12.5 against Arizona State. Quinn Ewers has been shaky. I wondered if Quinn Ewers should even stay in the game, in the SEC Championship game. I wondered if Archie Manning should come in. They didn't put him in. They kept Quinn Ewers around. So Quinn Ewers has been shaky. Arizona State could take over that. They could take care of that aspect of things. Cam Scatabo on the ground could take over. And Texas is known to let teams hang around, right? They're known in the SEC Championship game the last time they played, Texas just should have won straight up because Georgia has their quarterback out. Texas should be able to pull away at that point, and they didn't. And, of course, Georgia and Arizona State are different calibers of teams, but they let Georgia hang around. And Texas has been in some close games this year that arguably shouldn't be close, and it's because they shouldn't be close, right? Their only losses have been to Georgia. They've beaten everybody else, but they've let some teams hang around that shouldn't be capable of hanging around with the Longhorns. And that concerns me because Arizona State, with Kenny Dillingham and with Cam Scatabo, this is the type of team that could take advantage of that if they're allowed to be down by only one possession in the fourth quarter. The reason why I don't anticipate that actually being a problem and actually leading to an Arizona State victory is, first of all, if Texas had beaten Georgia, how different is this conversation? Well, this conversation wouldn't be happening because Texas would be the 2 seed. And, of course, this game was very close in overtime, and I understand the fact that they didn't actually win, but they could have. And they were very close, and it's the same with Ohio State, which I'll talk about in a second. Texas, if they had beaten Georgia, they'd be the 2 seed. They'd be playing Notre Dame right now. The conversation would be entirely different, and the conversation about Texas and how they're shaky would be different. Now, I don't think that that's true for Texas the same way it is for Ohio State, right? Arizona State doesn't get to the quarterback very much. They don't pressure quarterbacks very effectively, so Quinn Ewers is going to have plenty of time. Yes, he's been shaky, but this is a good matchup for him. I think his offensive line is going to stay stout in the pass protection. I think he's going to have plenty of time to throw the football and find those receivers that should be able to work their way into space against this Arizona State secondary. I just think Texas is better. I don't think they can beat some of those top teams. Texas is going to win, and they're going to play either Oregon or Ohio State, and I don't anticipate Texas advancing to the championship game the same way they couldn't against Washington last season, right? Quinn Ewers has been shaky. Texas lets teams hang around. They can't pull away, especially against good teams, and Arizona State, don't get me wrong, is a good team. They are, at the end of the day, Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to call it, conference champion. I just think that Texas, the way they match up and the way Texas is, I think that, having played last week as well, doing well against Clemson at home, Texas will be able to advance, carry this momentum into the next game in the next week against someone from the Big Ten who's going to be very, very impressive. Texas will beat Arizona State, but it might be close. Okay, the Rose Bowl, presented by Prudential, consists of Ohio State and Oregon, which is fun because this is a historic Rose Bowl game. It's a Big Ten it's a Big Ten team versus a former Pac-12 team, right? This game has occurred in the Rose Bowl before. It will again. This time, both teams come from the Big Ten, and they're playing in a playoff game. Ohio State is favored by 2.5, which I find very, very fascinating. The reason for that, partially, again, similar to Texas, is the question of what would the conversation around Ohio State be if they had won? What would the conversation around this game be if they had won? They lost to Oregon by 1 on the road earlier in the year. Very, very good loss, very impressive showing, and Ohio State just couldn't quite pull it out, which at the end of the day is fine, right? Totally acceptable to lose to, at this point, the number 1 team in the country, Oregon, by 1 on the road. But if Ohio State had won that game, they would have a major road victory. They may be undefeated, and if they weren't undefeated, then that loss to Michigan would not hurt them nearly as much. They would probably be in the Big Ten championship game. Maybe they would have won it. Maybe we're talking about a Ryan Day in an Ohio State program that beat Oregon, won the Big Ten championship game, and now is the 1 seed, perhaps, in the college football playoff, or at the very least the 2. If they had beaten Oregon, the conversation around Ryan Day and his hot seat situation, the conversation about Ohio State in big games, would be vastly different. Now, they didn't win that game. They didn't beat Oregon, but they got very close. And right now, the conversation around Ohio State, and I fell victim to this after they lost to Michigan, is that they're deflated. They can't win the big games, right? They just can't beat a good team. They can't beat a team better than them. Can't beat a team close to as good as them, right? And then they did what they did to Tennessee. And then I honestly picked Tennessee to beat Ohio State on the road. That's just the truth. That's what I did. I was wrong. And I am compensating for that by picking Ohio State to beat Oregon, because the conversation around Ohio State would be totally different. And the margins are very slim in all sports and college football, right? And Ohio State was very, very close to knocking off Oregon, and the conversation around their program would be vastly different. They could be favorites to win the championship if they had beaten Oregon, and that game was very, very close on the road. So I don't want the conversation around Ohio State to be the same as it was a couple weeks ago when we said they lost to Michigan, they can't do anything, Ryan Day is atrocious, we got to fire him, we got to just reset, another lost season. I don't think that that's true yet. I think Ohio State has a lot of fight left in him. Will Howard had his best game of the year, outside of the Tennessee game perhaps. Will Howard had his best game of the regular season, for sure, against Oregon the last time they played. And Oregon let Penn State put some points up on the board, right? Drew Aller was scoring against Oregon. This game could be a race to 40 by the end of it. It could be a race to 50, perhaps, between Ohio State and Oregon. Will Howard had his best game against Oregon last time around. Could that repeat itself? I think absolutely. Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson popped last time as well. At the end of the day, both teams scored 63 combined the last time these two teams played in the regular season. Dylan Gabriel has been on fire. He was phenomenal against Penn State. I would argue perfect against Penn State. The pass protection last time was stellar, and that allowed that to happen as well. Oregon can go shot for shot with Ohio State, but I think Ohio State can go shot for shot with Oregon. And I think that Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel could be very evenly matched in this game. I anticipate Dylan Gabriel to perform better, but I think Ohio State's going to win. And that's a bit of an outside pick, and it's a bit of a pick that I'm basing off of feel. They are favored. It's not even an upset necessarily. I'd be losing money if I picked Ohio State straight up to win this game. But I think Ohio State's going to spring. I guess it's not an upset because, again, Ohio State's favored. But effectively in the seeding, an upset, I think Ohio State's going to win. Because I think that Ohio State is massively slept on by the country. Because, again, at the end of the day, it's coin flips against Oregon in the regular season on the road. And Ohio State just did what they did to Tennessee. It's a veteran team. They're hungry. They're frustrated after the loss to Michigan. They're ready to go out and destroy teams. They won't destroy Oregon. This game will be close at the end. I just think Will Howard and Ohio State's going to pull it out, and I don't think Oregon is going to have much to say about it. I think Oregon's similar to what Georgia used to be, right? It took Georgia some time. Georgia had to try and fail a couple times to win a national championship. They couldn't get past Bama, and although these situations are different in a lot of ways, I think Oregon needs another try, right? Last year, they had a pretty good shot of going to the playoff and winning it all. Lost to Washington twice. This time, I think they're going to fall to Ohio State in the playoffs. And I think that they're going to have another try next year without Dylan Gabriel, perhaps, to really put up an opportunity to win a national championship. And they can still do that. Oregon is that caliber of a program now. I just think it's not the year. I think the number one team in the country, undefeated, all of those things, I think Ohio State's going to knock them off. Whether Ohio State goes on to win the whole thing or not, I don't think it's going to be Oregon. And I think Ohio State is going to be what stands in their way. All right, the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame versus Georgia. Georgia's favored by 1.5. ESPN's percentage FPI wheel was in favor of Notre Dame when this game first was this game on the schedule was first finalized. Georgia's missing a starting quarterback, and Riley Leonard is a dual threat opportunity. Those speed options, those read options, those play actions, those bootlegs, all wide open in the playbook. Riley Leonard, if he can throw the ball efficiently, and if he can use his legs and be a threat on the ground as well, Notre Dame's going to have a real strong shot to come out with a win in this one. The defense, the pass rush, they got to Rourke. They could get to Stockton. And again, Stockton, his only start was in the SEC championship game in the second half of that one. And he won. He pulled it out against Texas. But Notre Dame got to Rourke and really flustered in him. He's a phenomenal quarterback that started the whole year long. Gunnar Stockton, a young guy in the biggest game of his life. If Notre Dame starts to put some pressure and starts to imply some pressure that Gunnar Stockton can't handle, things might fall off the rails for Georgia very, very quickly. Georgia, though, they've been here before. They have the better program. They have a better roster. They survived against Texas, even with Carson Beck going down. They don't necessarily rely on Beck to have success. Their strength is the team around him. Beck just so happens to be incredible. Gunnar Stockton's pretty good himself. He can use some of that help with the team around him very well. The only thing I worry about is that Notre Dame is going to target Stockton because he's the weak link at this point. That position, quarterback, is the weak link for Georgia at this point. And if they get to Stockton and if he can't handle that well, Notre Dame very well might win this game. And I honestly just think that's the way that this is going to play out. I flip-flopped on this a couple times, but I'm picking Notre Dame to beat Georgia. And I technically, honestly, picked Indiana to go to the semifinals just with some slight homerism when the tournament started. But I did say that I thought Georgia was going to lose their first game right off the bat. And I might be wrong. I might get burned. But I think Notre Dame's going to win. And I think the semifinal matchups as a result are going to be Texas versus Ohio State and Penn State versus Notre Dame, both of which I think are very fun and interesting. And if you want to go further than that, it may very well be an Ohio State versus Notre Dame rematch national championship, an Ohio State versus Penn State rematch national championship. We're going to have a very, very exciting national championship no matter what. I think it's going to consist of two Midwest teams, whether that's Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, or some other combination of the three. I think Ohio State's going to beat Oregon. I think Texas is going to beat Arizona State. I think Penn State's going to beat Boise State. I think Notre Dame's going to beat Georgia. But this is going to be a phenomenal 2 days of college football as the quarterfinals, for the first time, the college football playoff quarterfinals come to our television screens on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.